All right, in this explainer, we're going to look at our cities in a completely new light. So forget about the static blueprints and the rigid master plans you might be used to. We're about to dive into some really groundbreaking research that imagines the city not as a machine, but as a living, breathing organism. And, this idea isn't entirely new. Over 60 years ago, the absolute legend of urbanism, Jane Jacobs, said this. She saw, way back then, that our obsession with creating perfectly ordered, neat-looking cities was actually sucking the life right out of them. And honestly, that diagnosis feels more true today than ever before. And here's the thing. That problem she identified, it's only gotten deeper. Our modern cities aren't just kinda dead in some spots, they're often physically fragile. The word for it is brittle. They're incredibly vulnerable to shocks like extreme weather, economic downturns, and, as we've all experienced, pandemics. These events just pull back the curtain on how fragile our urban systems really are. I mean, really think about your own city for a second. Why do some neighborhoods just buzz with energy and seem to bounce back from anything, while others feel, well, lifeless, and they seem to just fall apart under the slightest pressure? The research we're exploring today makes a bold claim. This is not an accident. It's the direct result of how we've been designing and building our cities for decades. So how do we fix this? Well, it all starts with a huge shift in perspective. The research proposes we have to stop seeing the city as this static, predictable machine and start seeing it for what it could be, a dynamic, living organism. And let me tell you, this one idea changes absolutely everything. So here's the difference in a nutshell. The old machine model is all about a fixed blueprint. The goal is to predict and control everything, which, ironically, leads to these very fragile systems. But the organism model? It's the complete opposite. It sees the city as this constantly evolving system. The goal isn't control. It's to sense what's happening and respond to it. And that is what makes a city truly resilient and adaptive. Okay, so if a city is a living organism, how do we know if it's healthy? Just like a doctor checks your vital signs, this research gives us 4 key qualities to measure the health of a city. Let's break them down. This table lays it all out beautifully. A healthy city has to be resilient. It absorbs shocks instead of shattering. It needs to be adaptive, always learning and adjusting instead of getting locked into old, outdated ways of doing things. It must be dynamic, filled with energy and movement, not stagnation. And finally, and maybe most importantly, it has to be living, creating spaces where people can actually flourish, not just exist in dead space. Let's zoom in on that first one, resilience, because it's a word we hear all the time, but it's often misunderstood. A resilient city isn't some fortress that perfectly resists all change. No, it's a city that can take a hit, like a flood or a recession, and then reorganize itself in a new way that keeps its core purpose intact. It's about adapting to not just survive, but to come out stronger. And technology gives us some incredible tools to make this happen. You can think of these steps as the city's immune system. We can use sensors to detect stress on a bridge long before it fails. We can simulate crises in a digital twin, a virtual replica of the city, to see how it would hold up. And we can analyze our transportation and utility grids to find those hidden weak spots before they cause a catastrophe. Okay, next up is dynamism. And the best way to get your head around this is to think of it as the city's metabolism. Just like a healthy body, a dynamic city has these constant, healthy flows of people, goods, and ideas moving all around. That circulation is what creates the economic and social vitality that makes a city feel alive. And check this out. Here's the proof of why dynamism is so powerful. Research into something called scaling laws has found something amazing. When you double a city's population, you don't just get double the innovation, you get a 115% increase. But you only need about 85% more infrastructure to support it. It's what's called an accelerating return. More density and more interaction literally equals more innovation. So, we have these vital signs, but how does a city actually monitor them? How does it sense and respond? Well, for that, it needs a nervous system, and that nervous system has a name. Urban informatics. So what on earth is urban informatics? Think of it as the brain and nervous system that powers the living city. It's this powerful combination of real-time data streaming in from sensors, super smart computer models that can make sense of it all, and new ways for all of us, citizens and governments, to work together. It's the tech that lets us finally see the city as a living thing and actually help it stay healthy.
This whole system basically has 4 key parts. You've got sensing from things like traffic sensors or even our own mobile data. Then you have data analytics, using AI to spot patterns we'd never see. You've got simulation, using those digital twins to test out ideas safely. And then there's the really crucial part, collaborative governance, using new platforms so that everyday people can have a real say. Put them all together, and you've got a city with a functioning nervous system.
Okay, so let's put all the pieces of this puzzle together. These 4 qualities, being resilient, adaptive, dynamic, and alive, they don't just exist in separate boxes. They're all deeply connected, and they work together to create a single, integrated system. And this is so important. This isn't some checklist where you can just focus on one thing and ignore the others. It doesn't work that way. A city's dynamic economy is what helps pay for the infrastructure that makes it resilient. That resilience, in turn, protects the living, vibrant neighborhoods that people love. And its ability to adapt ensures that all these different parts keep working in harmony. It's one single healthy organism. Now, this all sounds pretty incredible, right? A city that can sense its own problems, adapt, and even heal itself. But, and this is a really big but, this powerful new model forces us to ask some very profound, very difficult questions. It forces us to ask, we're building this amazing living city, but who is it for? The source material we're looking at is very clear on this. Technology is not a magic bullet. It creates some serious challenges. For example, how do we use all of this data to protect unique local neighborhoods from being steamrolled by big developers? How do we make sure our sensor networks don't just serve the wealthy areas, leaving other communities in a data shadow? And who exactly is held accountable when a decision shaped by an algorithm goes wrong? And that right there brings us to our final and most important thought. The idea of building a city that's alive is incredibly powerful, but the technology can't answer the human questions. A city can be resilient, adaptive, and dynamic, but it's still up to us, the people who live there, to decide what kind of life that city should support and to fight to make sure that everyone has a place within it.